everyone, I'm Nilam Holmes and I'm the Global Ambassador for the Oh So Pro Tatti Tint system. Today I'm going to show you how to do a precision brow tint. So as a professional, you should always have your station ready so that you've got everything at hand to perform your brow tint. This is what I like to prepare. For a precision brow tint, I like to have a dark or light pencil to outline the shape that I'm going to work with, because remember that tint can stain the skin. I like to have some dry cotton pads, some wet cotton pads, a little bit of Vaseline to protect the skin around the brows, some cotton buds that are half wet and half dry, my mixing dish with my fine angled brush to apply my brow tint, and a brush just to comb them through. I'll need the tint and the developer and the remover. Now, because my client is fair-haired, I'm going to be using the light brown dye. So this is perfect for your blonde and light brown hair clients. Now, if I want to darken it, I can add dark brown or I can add the black, which sounds a little bit scary, but if I want the client to have an ash brown hair color, I'm going to add a tiny drop of black to the mixture. But if I don't mind a warmer brow, then I'll stick to the dark brown. So I'm using light brown on my client today. And I want to darken it a touch, but I want to make sure it stays ash. So I'm actually going to use a tiny amount of the black, literally a minuscule amount like that. I need to add some developer, so I want about the same amount of developer to tint, and that just needs to be mixed really well. So adding that tiny fraction of black tint will darken the colour slightly, but it will also provide me with that ash tone. Now that tint is ready to use, but I'm just going to pop the lid on while I draw my brows in. So now we've got our tint mixed, I'm going to just make sure the skin is clean of any makeup. I'm going to make sure that the area is dry. I'm going to brush my brows into position. And then I'm going to start to draw my shape in. The reason I don't like to freehand precision tint is because when you apply tint to the eyebrows, it can also stain the skin as well. So if you end up with it blurred all around the edges, it's just really difficult to get off. So it's easier to actually set your shape first and then apply the tint within it. Also bear in mind that the tint will bleed slightly out of this shape. So I'm going to be more conservative and keep it within the shape. You can do the same thing using a white pencil as well. It doesn't have to be a dark one, but I always prefer to use a dark one because I think it gives me a better idea of what the brows will look like at the end. So you want to make sure that both brows look the same, but remember they're not going to be identical. Your brows are always sisters and not twins. So now I'm going to take my tint and I'm going to apply this within the shape that I've designed. Now I'm not going to start right at the front because I always want this area to be lighter, and the longer you leave your tint on for, the darker it will develop. So I'm going to apply the fronts last. If you do get any onto the skin, don't worry, because the tint remover is really good and it will remove the stain from the skin. It just won't remove the tint from the hairs. Also, by using a brush to apply your tint, you can get really close in between the hairs so that you can dye all those fluffy hairs that we have underneath. So those hairs can always make your brows look fuller. And a brow tint is really good for anybody. Anyone can have it done, anyone who wants to make something more of their brows. You'll be surprised on some brows when people have really fair brows, they don't think they've got any brow at all. But once you dye them and you see all this sort of fluff come to life, it can really, give you the brow that you didn't think you had. So really just taking my time to apply that. I've chosen a lighter colour so that I can get away with applying it slowly and leaving it on for a bit longer. So when it comes to tinting, The longer you leave the tint on for, the darker the colour will develop. If you have used a darker colour, you really need to check the colour within about 30 seconds of application to see how it's developing, because you might need to remove it quickly. Now I've applied that, I'm going to take the wet end of my cotton buds and I'm going to just remove any excess around the edges. If you're unsure of your skills, what you can do is to use some Vaseline just around the shape you've drawn before you apply your tint. So now I've cleaned up the edges, I'm going to remove a tiny bit of the tint from the midsection of the brow just to check the colour. And I do that by using a dry cotton bud and just rolling it on the skin so I don't smudge it onto the surrounding area. Now I want to take this tint off when I think that it's almost dark enough, because once I've removed it, it will continue to develop for a little while longer. So I think it's ready to come off. So I'm going to use a dry cotton pad to remove the tint now. Try not to spread it all across the skin. If I feel the colour's too dark, what I can do is just use damp cotton pads to remove the tint, and that way that will neutralise the tint from developing any further. So once you've removed all the excess tint, just brush the brows through. I always get my clients to avoid washing their brows for the first 12 hours because the hairs are so porous. If they want their tint to last longer, I would suggest not washing them for about 24 hours. If they feel they're a little bit dark, they can wash them tonight. Generally, clients lose about 50% of the colour on the first wash, so you always want to make sure they're a little bit darker than you need them when they leave the salon. If your client wants to have a lamination treatment or waxing on the same day, what you would do is you would laminate first, then you would tint, and then you would wax. So that's the order that you would do those in. So that's how we do a precision brow tint using the Oh So Pro Tatti Tint system. I hope you've enjoyed watching the tutorial. Stay tuned for more. See you next time.